Story 1. The Phantom Pumpkin Patch. In the heart of rural America, where the horizon stretches endlessly across fields of swaying corn and dilapidated barns, lies the small, forgotten town of Harrow's End. It was a place where time seemed to have stopped, where the air carried the weight of untold stories and the soil whispered secrets of the past. The narrator, Ethan, grew up in this desolate corner of the world, where poverty clung to every cracked porch and rusted mailbox. His family scraped by, their modest farmhouse a sanctuary amid the decay of abandoned churches and sagging homes. The town was a tapestry of odd characters, some harmless, others unsettling, like their neighbor, Old Man Carver, who muttered to himself and stared too long at passers-by. It was the autumn of 2015, and Ethan, then 22, had recently matched with a girl named Kelly on a now-defunct dating app called Hot or Not. Kelly was a breath of fresh air in Harrow's End, with her sharp wit and adventurous spirit. Their romance blossomed through late summer, filled with long drives down dusty roads, impromptu hikes through overgrown trails, and greasy diner meals. By early October, with the leaves turning fiery shades of red and gold, they were eager for a new adventure. The town offered little in the way of entertainment, so they decided to explore a new route, hoping to stumble upon something, anything to break the monotony. As they cruised along a desolate stretch of Highway 17, the world outside their car was cloaked in a thick, rolling fog that seemed to swallow the landscape whole. The radio crackled with static, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and their occasional laughter. Then, like a mirage, a small roadside diner appeared, its neon sign flickering weakly in the mist. The place, called Ma's Kitchen, was a weathered shack with outdoor picnic tables and a gravel lot. It was quaint, almost charming in its simplicity, and they decided it was the perfect spot for a cheap date. They sat outside, sipping lukewarm coffee and sharing a plate of fries, the fog curling around them like a living thing. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, chatted idly about the weather, warning them to drive carefully in the haze. After an hour, they paid their bill and returned to the car. The fog now so dense, it was like driving through a dream. They continued down the unfamiliar road, the world reduced to a narrow tunnel of visibility. Fields stretched endlessly on either side, broken only by the occasional silhouette of a gnarled tree or a crumbling fence. Then they saw it, a crude wooden sign, half buried in the dirt, with the words "Pumpkin Picking This Way" scrawled in faded paint, an arrow pointing to a narrow dirt driveway. The sign was makeshift, almost ominous in its simplicity, but the promise of a pumpkin patch in the middle of nowhere was too intriguing to resist. Ethan glanced at Kelly, who nodded with a mischievous grin, and he turned the car onto the rutted path. The driveway wound through a field of tall, dry grass, leading to a small, weathered farmhouse that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Its windows were dark, its paint peeling, and the porch sagged under the weight of years. Beyond the house, tucked between a dense copse of trees and a thicket of brambles, was a sprawling pumpkin patch. Hundreds of pumpkins, some vibrant and plump, others misshapen and rotting, dotted the muddy ground. The fog hung low, shrouding the edges of the patch in mystery, and the air was heavy with the earthy scent of damp soil. They parked next to an ancient pickup truck, its paint chipped and tires flat, the only other vehicle in sight. As they stepped out, two figures emerged from the shadows of the farmhouse's back porch. An elderly couple, their faces lined with age and their clothes worn but clean. The old woman, her hair a wispy halo of white, greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome, dears," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Pick any pumpkin you like. No charge." Ethan, surprised by the offer, asked if she was sure. The old man, his face partially hidden by the brim of a tattered hat, nodded, his smile revealing a gummy, toothless grin that made Kelly shift uncomfortably. The fog obscured their features, lending them an almost ethereal quality, but their kindness seemed genuine. Ethan and Kelly thanked them and ventured into the patch, their shoes sinking into the wet earth. The pumpkins were a mixed bag. Some were perfect for carving, others soft and slimy to the touch. The fog pressed closer, muffling their voices and making the world feel impossibly small. After some searching, Ethan found a large, healthy pumpkin, its skin a deep, vibrant orange. He hefted it with a grunt, its weight surprising him, and carried it back toward the porch to thank the couple again. But when they reached the deck, the old couple was gone. The porch was empty, the chairs still, as if no one had been there at all. Kelly frowned, glancing around. "Maybe they went inside," she suggested, but her voice betrayed her unease. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant croak of a frog. Ethan shrugged, trying to shake off the growing sense of wrongness. "They said it was free. I guess we can just go." They returned to the car, the pumpkin stowed in the back seat, and Ethan began a three-point turn to head back down the driveway. That's when they heard it, a shout sharp and angry, cutting through the fog. "Hey, stop!" A man middle-aged and burly stormed toward them from the direction of the house. He wore a stained cap and a scowl that made Ethan's stomach lurch. Before Ethan could react, the man was at the driver's window, his face red with fury. "What the hell are y'all doing? I'm calling the cops." Ethan's heart pounded as he tried to explain. "We were told we could take a pumpkin. The older couple on the porch said it was free." Kelly nodded frantically, her voice overlapping his as she corroborated the story. The man's eyes narrowed, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. "Older couple? What are you talking about? Ain't no one else here. I live alone." The words hung in the air like a curse. Ethan's mouth went dry. "They were right there," he insisted, pointing to the porch. "An old man and woman. They greeted us, told us to pick whatever we wanted." The man's face hardened again. "You're lying. Get that pumpkin out of your car and don't ever come back here, or I swear I'll shoot you both." He reached into the back seat, grabbed the pumpkin, and stormed off, spitting on the ground as he disappeared into the fog. Ethan drove away, his hands shaking on the wheel. Kelly was silent, her eyes wide with fear. They didn't speak for miles, the encounter replaying in their minds. Was it a prank? A misunderstanding? Or something else entirely? The question gnawed at Ethan, and a week later he sent his siblings, Mia and Jake, to the pumpkin patch to investigate. They returned with a pumpkin they'd paid for, and a chilling piece of information. The man who introduced himself as Amos had lived alone for years. No parents, no relatives, no one. Ethan and Kelly never returned to that stretch of Highway 17. The memory of the old couple lingered, their faces hazy in his mind, like figures from a dream. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered if they'd been real at all, or if they'd stumbled into something far stranger, something that belonged to the fog and the forgotten corners of Harrow's End. Story 2. The Shadow in the House. It was the kind of October night that felt alive with possibility, the air crisp and electric with the promise of Halloween. In the suburban sprawl of Maplewood, where cul-de-sacs were lined with neatly trimmed lawns and glowing jack-o'-lanterns, 17-year-old Lucas was itching for a break from the monotony of high school life. His best friend Connor was the spark to his kindling, always ready with a plan to turn a dull weekend into something unforgettable. When Connor texted that Saturday morning, inviting Lucas to his house while his parents were out of town, Lucas knew exactly what was coming: a night of video games, junk food, and, inevitably, trouble. Connor's house was a sprawling two-story affair, the kind of place that felt too big for its occupants. His older sister, Chantel, was technically in charge, but she was more interested in her phone than in babysitting two teenage boys. By mid-afternoon, Lucas and Connor were sprawled on the family room couch, controllers in hand, blasting their way through Call of Duty. The hours melted away as they traded stories about school, crushes, and the upcoming football game. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Connor's eyes lit up with a new idea. "There's a Halloween party tonight," he said, tossing his controller aside. "In the neighborhood. Everyone from school's going. You in?" Lucas hesitated. Parties weren't really his thing. He preferred the comfort of a small group to the chaos of a crowded house. But Connor's enthusiasm was infectious, and Lucas didn't want to let his friend down. "Fine," he said with a grin, "but we need costumes." Connor rummaged through a closet and produced two black t-shirts with security printed in bold white letters. "Good enough," he declared, and Lucas couldn't help but laugh. They played Xbox until 10:30 p.m., the house growing darker as the night deepened. Connor ran upstairs to inform Chantel they were leaving. She barely looked up from her phone, and they threw on their makeshift costumes and headed out. The neighborhood was alive with Halloween spirit, every house adorned with cobwebs, skeletons, and flickering orange lights. The party was just a 5-minute walk away, in a house that pulsed with music so loud it seemed to shake the ground. As they approached, Lucas could see silhouettes moving behind the windows, the glow of strobe lights spilling onto the lawn. Inside the house was a chaotic sea of teenagers. The air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume, sweat, and spilled drinks. Kids in costumes ranging from elaborate to non-existent danced, laughed, and shouted over the pounding bass. Lucas felt a twinge of unease, but before he could dwell on it, he was swept into a group of friends from the baseball team. They pulled him onto a couch, and soon he was caught up in a whirlwind of laughter, reminiscing about old games and embarrassing moments. Connor, meanwhile, had vanished into the crowd, likely chasing a girl or causing some kind of mischief. Hours passed in a blur. By 1 a.m., Lucas was exhausted, the noise and heat of the party overwhelming him. He decided it was time to head back to Connor's house to crash. He found Connor in the kitchen, flirting with a girl in a witch costume. "Hey man, I'm gonna head back and sleep," Lucas said, interrupting their conversation. The girl, slightly annoyed, asked if he could grab some drinks from the basement fridge first. Feeling guilty for cutting in, Lucas agreed. The basement door was tucked in a corner of the kitchen, its paint chipped and handle cold to the touch. Lucas opened it and descended the narrow, dimly lit stairs, each step creaking under his weight. The basement was a cavernous space, cluttered with old furniture and boxes, the air damp and musty. He stumbled on the last step, catching himself against a rusted fridge in the corner. As he opened the door, a voice whispered from the darkness behind him, "Boo!" Lucas spun around, heart racing, to find a man standing there. He was tall, maybe 35, with sharp features and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He wore a black cloak like a cheap vampire costume, and his presence in the empty basement was jarring. "What the hell was that for?" Lucas snapped, his voice slurring slightly from the drinks he'd had. The man laughed, introducing himself as the party host's cousin, but there was something off about him. His smile too wide, his eyes too intense. Lucas muttered an excuse, grabbed a couple of cans and hurried back upstairs, the man's gaze burning into his back. He delivered the drinks, said a quick goodbye to Connor, and left the party. The walk back to Connor's house was quiet, the neighborhood now eerily still, the Halloween decorations casting long, twisted shadows under the streetlights. Lucas couldn't shake the memory of the man in the basement. Why was he alone down there, lurking in the dark? The more he thought about it, the more it unnerved him. When he reached Connor's house, it was pitch black, Chantel's car gone from the driveway. He let himself in with the spare key under the mat and headed straight to the basement, too tired to bother with lights. The basement was a cozy space, with a worn couch and a small TV, perfect for crashing. He collapsed onto the couch and was asleep within minutes, the events of the night fading into a haze. Then a crash jolted him awake. It came from upstairs, a sharp, unmistakable sound, like glass shattering. Lucas sat up, his pulse racing, and strained to listen. The house was silent, but the silence felt wrong, heavy with intent. He told himself it was nothing, maybe a raccoon knocking over a trash can, but then he heard it, the slow, deliberate creak of floorboards above him. Someone was moving through the house. His phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Still at the party, you good?" Lucas's blood ran cold. If Connor wasn't home and Chantel was out, who was upstairs? He texted back, "Someone's in the house," and crept to the foot of the basement stairs. The door at the top was ajar, and as he peered up, a shadow moved across the landing. Then the door creaked open, and a figure began to descend. In the dim glow of the stairlight, Lucas saw him, the man from the party, his black cloak unmistakable. He moved silently, his eyes scanning the darkness. Lucas ducked behind the couch, his breath shallow, praying he wouldn't be seen. The man paused at the bottom of the stairs, his head tilted as if listening. For a moment, Lucas thought he'd been spotted, but then the man turned and climbed back upstairs, closing the door behind him. Lucas didn't hesitate. He dialed 911, whispering the situation to the dispatcher. The basement windows were sealed shut, leaving the door as his only exit, and the man was somewhere up there. He waited, every creak of the house amplifying his fear, until the police arrived. When they searched the house, they found the man hiding under Chantel's bed. She had returned home just minutes before, oblivious to the intruder, and was moments from climbing into bed when the cops knocked. The police later reviewed security footage from a neighbor's camera. It showed the man following Lucas from the party, losing sight of him at the cul-de-sac, but lingering in the area. He'd watched Chantel arrive, then broke in through the back door. His intentions were unclear, but the thought of what might have happened sent chills down Lucas's spine. From that night on, he never walked alone after dark, and the memory of the man in the cloak haunted his dreams. Story 3: The Watchers in the Woods. The Catskill Mountains in October are a symphony of color, where the leaves blaze with hues of amber, crimson, and gold, and the air carries the crisp promise of autumn. For Courtney and Lena, a married couple in their late 20s, the mountains were a sanctuary, a place to escape the noise of city life and reconnect with nature. Both avid hikers, they had explored trails across the country, from the rugged peaks of Yosemite to the lush forests of the Smokies. This was their third trip to the Catskills, and they had booked a charming Airbnb near Overlook Mountain, a trail known for its breathtaking views and challenging ascent. The Airbnb was a rustic cabin, nestled in a clearing surrounded by dense woods. Its wooden walls were adorned with vintage maps and antlers, and bright rugs softened the hardwood floors. The owner, Kathy, was a warm, grandmotherly woman in her 60s, with a quick smile and a knack for making guests feel at home. She communicated via text, providing the code to a lockbox where the key was hidden. Outside, a converted shed housed a pool table and dartboard, a quirky touch that added to the cabin's charm. Courtney and Lena settled in, excited for a weekend of hiking, cozy nights, and each other's company. Their first day was spent on the Overlook Mountain Trail, a 5-mile round trip that wound through forests of towering pines and past crumbling stone ruins. The trail was moderately busy, with small groups of hikers passing by, their voices fading into the rustle of leaves. Courtney and Lena reached a scenic overlook, a massive rock jutting out over a sheer cliff, offering a panoramic view of the Hudson Valley below. They sat there for nearly an hour, sharing a thermos of coffee and snapping photos. The world spread out before them like a painting. As they lingered, a faint crunch of leaves broke the silence. They turned to see a woman standing about 20 feet away, leaning against a tree. She was in her mid-50s, with short graying hair and a weathered face, dressed in hiking gear that looked slightly too clean, as if it had never seen a real trail. She was staring at them, her expression unreadable, but when they met her gaze, she quickly looked away, pretending to study the ground. Courtney raised an eyebrow at Lena, who shrugged, but the moment felt off, like a note played out of tune. They might have ignored it, but then the woman spoke. "Hi," she said, her voice overly cheerful. They returned the greeting, and she approached, introducing herself as Melinda. She claimed to be a local, eager to share tips about the area. The conversation was polite but strained. Melinda asked where they were from, where they were staying, her questions probing in a way that felt too personal. Lena mentioned they were at an Airbnb nearby, and Melinda's smile tightened, though she nodded and suggested a few restaurants. The exchange fizzled out, and Courtney and Lena excused themselves as starting their descent. As they hiked down, they noticed Melinda following at a distance, her footsteps echoing theirs. When they paused to rest, she stopped too, lingering just out of earshot. The pattern was unmistakable, and a chill settled over them. "Is she following us?" Lena whispered. Courtney nodded, her jaw tight. They decided to wait her out, sitting on a fallen log until Melinda finally moved past, flashing an odd smile and saying, "Okay," as she disappeared down the trail. Back at the parking lot, they shook off the unease and drove to the Airbnb. Exhausted, they napped, then headed to a cozy vegan spot called Garden Cafe for dinner, laughing over plates of roasted vegetables and wine. By the time they returned to the cabin, night had fallen, the woods an inky void beyond the windows. They planned a low-key evening, curling up on the living room couch with a horror movie on Netflix. The glow of the TV, their only light. Halfway through the film, as Courtney's eyelids grew heavy, a sharp knock at the door shattered the quiet. The sound was like a gunshot in the stillness, and both women froze. They were miles from civilization, surrounded by nothing but trees. No one should be here. The blinds were drawn, the door lacked a peephole, and the idea of opening it was unthinkable. Courtney muted the TV, and they listened, hearts pounding. Another knock followed, slower, more deliberate. Then a woman's voice called from outside. "Hello? Is anyone there?" It was soft, almost pleading, but it sent a jolt of fear through them. Courtney shook Lena awake, whispering, "Someone's at the door." They sat in silence, hoping the visitor would leave. But then came a new sound, a knock on the window, followed by the voice again. "I need help. Please let me in." The words were chilling, not because of their urgency, but because of their calm, practiced tone. Courtney grabbed her phone and texted Kathy, asking if she was outside. Before Kathy could respond, they heard a faint scraping, like someone trying to lift the window. The lock held, but the attempt was brazen, terrifying. Kathy called, her voice tense. "I'm at home," she said. "No one should be there. Don't open the door." Courtney relayed the situation, and Kathy's concern deepened. "I don't know who that could be. Stay safe." As they hung up, another knock came, this time from a different window, and the voice called again, more insistent. "Please, I'm hurt. I need help." The words felt like a trap, a lure designed to exploit their compassion. Lena's eyes widened as she whispered, "What if it's that woman from the trail?" Melinda? The thought was paralyzing. Had she followed them, waiting for nightfall to strike? Courtney crept to the bedroom, where the darkness was absolute, and carefully lifted a blind just enough to peek outside. In the faint moonlight, she saw a man, not Melinda, walking past the window, his face obscured by a hood. He moved with purpose, scanning the house. There was more than one person out there. Panic set in. They dialed 911, giving the operator the address and staying on the line. The knocks continued, sporadic but relentless, each one a reminder of the threat circling the cabin. Courtney and Lena huddled in the living room, clutching kitchen knives they'd grabbed in desperation, every creak of the house amplifying their fear. After what felt like an eternity, the knocks stopped, and the voices fell silent. They didn't dare move until they heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The police had arrived. The officers swept the property, finding no one, but the ground outside showed fresh footprints, some near the windows. They stayed with Courtney and Lena as they packed, their nerves too frayed to remain in the cabin. Kathy, devastated by the incident, refunded their stay, and an officer escorted them to a nearby motel. The next morning they drove home, the Catskills' beauty tainted by the memory of that night. They later learned from a local news report that a string of break-ins had plagued the area, targeting remote Airbnbs. The perpetrators used a woman to scout potential victims, gaining their trust before striking under cover of darkness. Courtney and Lena never confirmed if Melinda was part of the scheme, but the thought of her watching them on that trail haunted their dreams. From then on, they carried pepper spray on every hike, a small but vital shield against the shadows that lurked in the wild.